In 1757, the Bengal region of the Indian subcontinent was the industrial and agricultural heartland of the planet. It was an economic powerhouse that produced fine silk, spices, and high-quality cotton, single-handedly driving nearly a quarter of all global manufacturing. Across the world, a group of stockbrokers operating out of a private corporate office in London wanted absolute, tax-free control of those resources. They were the British East India Company, a joint stock corporation designed with one singular goal: maximizing profit for its shareholders. Standing in the way of their expansion was the local ruler Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah. To protect his wealthy territory from corporate encroachment, the Nawab commanded a massive and deeply entrenched state army. Take a look at the scale comparison. On the left, we have the Nawab's sprawling military forces. On the right, the East India Company's private mercenary army. The corporate troops were a fraction of the size, vastly outnumbered, and entirely unequipped to fight a traditional war against a sprawling state power. A kinetic battlefield victory was completely off the table. To survive, the British East India Company abandoned military doctrine and deployed a ruthless corporate playbook. The head of the corporate forces, Robert Clive, knew that directly fighting at the Battle of Plassey meant guaranteed bankruptcy. So instead of fighting the enemy, he decided to cut a deal with them in the shadows. Clive treated the battle as a hostile corporate buyout. Through a series of heavy bribes, he targeted the Nawab's highest-ranking military commander, Mir Jafar, promising him wealth and power in exchange for betrayal on the battlefield. On June 23, 1757, the two forces met at Plassey. The fighting barely started before it was over. Mir Jafar and his commanders stood their massive armies down, instantly collapsing the Nawab's defense. By treating enemy commanders as corruptible assets, a private corporation conquered a powerful, sovereign state without fighting a protracted war. Capturing Bengal was only their initial market entry. To spread their control across the entire subcontinent, the East India Company seized the Diwani. This gave a group of London shareholders the absolute right to collect land revenues and taxes from millions of Indian citizens. Before the takeover, European merchants injected massive gold and silver into India to purchase goods. The East India Company redesigned this loop. They collected Indian taxes, used that exact money to purchase Indian commodities, and shipped them back for 100% profit. They weaponized this stolen revenue stream to build an infinite war machine. The company used the extracted taxes to recruit, arm, and pay an ever-growing private army composed of local Indian troops known as Sepoys. The company had trapped the local population in a perfect, self-funding cycle. The citizens of India were financially and physically fueling the engine of their own subjugation. After a century of ruthless corporate extraction, the boiling anger of the Indian people erupted. In 1857, the company's own Sepoys launched a massive, bloody rebellion across northern India. The East India Company fought back, executing thousands and crushing the uprising with merciless brutality. In London, the British Parliament decided a volatile joint stock corporation could no longer govern such a massive territory. In 1858, they dissolved the East India Company entirely and brought India under the direct rule of the British Crown. But the extraction accelerated. The British government began importing cheap, machine-made fabrics from the industrial mills of Lancashire and dumping them into the Indian market. Millions of highly skilled Indian weavers were pushed out of work as their traditional handloom industry was systematically decimated. At the same time, colonial administrators forced Indian farmers to abandon food crops like wheat and rice. They were ordered to grow cash crops for global export, like indigo, tea, and opium. When severe droughts hit, the administration continued exporting food to Europe, resulting in manufactured famines that starved nearly 35 million people to death. Indian taxpayers were also forced to fund a massive standing military force used to police Britain's global empire. During the First World War, over 2.5 million Indian men were pulled from their homes to fight and die in foreign trenches. Transitioning from corporate rule to crown rule did not end the exploitation. It institutionalized a system that aggressively extracted Indian land, labor, and life on an industrial scale. By 1945, the Second World War had bankrupted the British Treasury. The empire could no longer afford the military and administrative costs of holding the subcontinent, especially while facing an unstoppable, roaring ocean of defiance from the Indian independence movement. Look at this line graph tracking India's share of the global economy. When the British arrived in 1600, India commanded over 24% of the world's wealth. By the time they were forced out in 1947, that number plummeted to less than 4%. They left behind a deeply impoverished and fractured nation. The East India Company proved that armed with military force and a willingness to exploit human life, corporate greed can drain the richest civilizations on Earth completely dry.